Our reading this evening comes from Exodus chapter 40, verses 17 to 38. If you have a church Bible, that's on page 100 of our church Bibles, and it's on the screen behind me if you want to follow the screen. So we're in Exodus chapter 40, and we're beginning to read at verse 17. So the tabernacle was set up on the first day of the first month in the second year. When Moses set up the tabernacle, he put the bases in place, erected the frames, inserted the crossbars, and set up the posts. Then he spread the tent over the tabernacle and put the covering over the tent, as the Lord commanded him. He took the tablets of the covenant law and placed them in the ark, attached the poles to the ark, and put the atonement cover over it. Then he brought the ark into the tabernacle and hung the shielding curtain and shielded the ark of the covenant law, as the Lord commanded him. Moses placed the table in the tent of meeting on the north side of the tabernacle outside the curtain and set out the bread on it before the Lord, as the Lord commanded him. He placed the lampstand in the tent of meeting opposite the table on the south side of the tabernacle and set up the lamps before the Lord, as the Lord commanded him. Moses placed the gold altar in the tent of meeting in front of the curtain and burned fragrant incense on it, as the Lord commanded him. Then he put up the curtain at the entrance to the tabernacle. He set the altar of burnt offerings near the entrance to the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, and offered on it burnt offerings and grain offerings, as the Lord commanded him. He placed the basin between the tent of meeting and the altar and put water in it for washing. And Moses and Aaron and his sons used it to wash their hands and feet. They washed whenever they entered the tent of meeting or approached the altar, as the Lord commanded Moses. Then Moses set up in the courtyard around the tabernacle an altar and put up the curtain at the entrance to the courtyard. And so Moses finished the work. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. In all the travels of the Israelites, whenever the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, they would set out. But if the cloud did not lift, they did not set out until the day it lifted. So the cloud of the Lord was over the tabernacle by day, and fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all the Israelites during all their travels. This is God's word.
Thank you very much indeed, Helen, for reading that. It was the 4th of July, 1776, when the US Congress signed that famous Declaration of Independence. And in the preamble, there's these famous words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That was what the Declaration of Independence set before the people and said, this is what it's about. You have life, you have liberty, the freedom to pursue happiness. There's a sort of assumption built in there, though, isn't there, that happiness is actually the greatest goal, that happiness is the thing above all others which we should be pursuing. And my question, or perhaps my contention for us this evening is, I wonder if God's word, the Bible, has a slightly different goal in view for us. And that actually what we're going to see as we look at the book of Leviticus is that the thing we're meant to pursue isn't so much happiness in and of itself for its own sake, but actually we are meant to pursue holiness. And we'll need to think about what exactly that means and how we understand that. But if the Bible says actually the thing that human beings are made for, the thing we're meant to be pursuing as we enjoy life and liberties is the pursuit of holiness, particularly the pursuit of Him who is holy, And what we'll discover is actually it's not just our pursuit of his holiness, but his holiness in pursuit of us. What we'll find when we do that, when we live like that, is actually a truer, deeper and more permanent sort of happiness will actually be thrown in. So if you're visiting with us this evening, you've come at a good time. We're starting this evening a 6-part series looking at the book of Leviticus. Now, I know many people have had this experience. They thought, I want to read a Bible. And so they start at the beginning and they just start reading. Now, for most people, when they get to Leviticus, they stop reading. Because it's not obvious always quite what's there, is it? There's lots of rituals, there's sacrifices, there's some strange laws. And lots of people, like we read that today and say, look, it's very ancient, it's 3,500 years ago, it feels quite strange and alien to us. Like, is there anything there for us? And I want to say that there is, and there's some really wonderful stuff there for us actually, but we do need to take the time to kind of work out like how you read it. And what exactly is there for us. I kind of think it's a bit like, the book of Leviticus is a bit like, you ever done one of those penny rubbing things where you put a piece of paper over the top of a penny and you get a pencil and you start kind of shading over the top. And the more you go over, and as you apply a little bit more pressure, an image starts to emerge. The book of Leviticus is a little bit like that. You've got to take a bit of time. But as you do so, as you kind of colour over it and spend time looking at it, this amazing image appears, particularly in regards to who God is, who we are, what our most fundamental problem as human beings is, and how that gets fixed by God himself. As we look at this book, I think it's going to do 4 things for us. I think it's going to humble us, as it shows us like the reality of ourselves as those who've rebelled against God and kept him at arm's length. It's going to show us the reality of that. It's going to kind of inspire awe within us as it really shows us that the holiness and the majesty and the awesome splendor of God our Creator. It's going to fill us with wonder because we're actually going to see how Jesus fulfills all of this stuff, all these sacrifices and all these roles, everything that's happening in the book, it's all fulfilled in Jesus. And as you see more of the detail of that, the more you're going to go, wow, that's amazing. Jesus is amazing. What he came to do is amazing. And it's going to inspire us, I think, or at least challenge us to be holy. One of the calls in the book is be holy, because I'm holy. That's what God says to the people. I'm going to say, well, what does it mean to be a radically different sort of people in the world? So all these things that we're going to see as we go. And if you're kind of unfamiliar with how the book fits into history, perhaps just think about it this way. The book before Leviticus is a book called Exodus. And that tells the story of how Israel was slaves in Egypt. God brought them out of their slavery. They crossed the Red Sea. They came to Mount Sinai. God gave them the 10 Commandments. And by the time we get to Leviticus, that they're on their way to a land that God had promised them. And so through books like Leviticus, we say, look, these are the people journeying. They've left Egypt. They left slavery. They're journeying towards God's promised land. Well, how do they live on the way? Particularly, and I think kind of Exodus 40 verse 35 shows us kind of the heart of the issue here. When we read that as the tabernacle, and that's this great big tent, the place where God symbolically dwells, where the priests bring the sacrifices. As it's finished, as they've done all the arrangements for that, verse 35 of Exodus 40, Moses couldn't enter the tent of meeting because the cloud that had settled on it, the glory of the Lord had filled it. So as God symbolically kind of comes and dwells in this place, Moses can't go in. Moses cannot come into the presence of a holy God because he, like you and I, is just an ordinary person who's done things to offend God and upset God and rebel against God. It's what the Bible calls our sin. So the big question Leviticus answers is, how does a holy God dwell among and journey with a sinful people? Or to put it the other way around, how do sinful people journey with and stay in relationship with a holy and almighty God? How does that work Well, the book of Leviticus is, if you like, it's God's great big teaching manual, teaching aid to show the people how it is they stay in relationship, how holy he is, how they deal with this problem of their rebellious spirits and hearts, their sin. So this evening, I want to give you, we're not going to dive into the text, we'll start that next week. This evening, what I want to give you is, I want to give you 3 keys to unlock the heart of the message of the book. Okay, 3 keys, which if you get them, they're going to help you understand the heart of Leviticus, particularly the heart of the message of Leviticus. And each key is about the arrangement of things. So we're going to think about the arrangement of the text. We're going to think about the arrangement of the space. And we're going to think about the arrangement of time. Okay, so here's the first one, the arrangement of the text. Because although Leviticus looks daunting, if you can get your head around this, it's actually fairly straightforward in its structure and how you can begin to get a handle on understanding it. Here's a diagram for you. I don't know if you can see all the details on that, different colours. Hopefully you can. The book essentially starts and ends with the same thing, and it works toward a middle. Now, if you're into literature, the technical term for this is a chiasm. A chiasm is where kind of the outside bits match, and then the next bits in match, and the next bits in after that match, and then you've got a centre to the thing. Okay. So what you've got, if you can't quite see that, is at the start of the book and the end of the book, there's talk about rituals, and we're going to start looking at that next week. So Leviticus 1-7, it's the ritual offerings and the sacrifices, and there are 5 of them. At the end of the book, there's rituals around festivals, and there are 7 of those. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at next week. As you go into the book, chapters 8-10 talk about the ordination for priests, and then chapters 21-22 talk about some rules for the priests. Okay, so you go rituals next week, week after that, priests. As you go in one more step, you get purity laws. So chapters 11-15, there's laws about ritual purity. And then chapters 18-20, there's laws about moral purity. We'll look at those the week after. And then at the very centre of the book, right in the middle, at the heart of the book, is stuff about atonement, particularly this thing called the Day of Atonement, their most important festival day. Now, the reason why it's helpful to understand the structure, how it sort of moves into this and then out of atonement, is because atonement is at the very centre of the book. The Day of Atonement happens at the very centre of the camp of Israel's life together. It's the very kind of high point of their year. It's the centre of the book because it's the centre of the story. Actually, more than that, atonement is at the centre of the human story. So this idea of atonement, how it is that God deals with human sin and rebellion, that's at the very heart of human story. That's at the very heart of every individual person's story. So the reason atonement's at the centre of it is because it's really at the centre of everything. As we'll see when we get there. We'll meet it along the way, but the Day of Atonement is really at the heart of things because it's the place where the justice of God, because he can't turn a blind eye to sin, and the mercy of God, because he desires to make a way for forgiveness, atonement is the place where God's justice and his mercy meet. And that can only happen through costly sacrifice. And that's what you see. That's what you see in the book of Leviticus, at the Day of Atonement. Actually, that is what Jesus is going to come and fulfill perfectly as he is the perfect forever sacrifice. So something about the arrangement of the text. Secondly, something about the arrangement of the space. Now, you don't get the arrangement of space detailed in Leviticus. You have to look at Exodus and the book after, Numbers, for that. But you do need to understand the arrangement of space to understand kind of what's going on with all the rituals and the priests and the offerings. So if you imagine that the camp of Israel, so Israel are a people on the move. They've left Egypt. They are journeying toward the promised land. And every time they set out, they set up camp. That they stay somewhere for a little while, they pack everything up, they move on, they set up camp. But every time they set up camp, you can imagine looking a little bit like this. This is the tent of meeting, or what's called the tabernacle. It's not Glastonbury. What I mean by that is it's not like you set up the tent and then everyone just pitches their tents where they like. You just find any kind of clear spot of ground and you just dump your tent down, you stay for a few days, and then you move on. It's not like that. Everything is incredibly carefully arranged, and it's for a purpose. It's for a teaching purpose, actually. So actually, if you were to take this picture and kind of zoom out a bit and zoom above it and say, well, what does it look like if you were to try and map it out? It would look a little bit like this. Now, don't worry about all the numbers and all the detail in there. What I want you to notice is right in the middle of the camp is this tent, this tent of meeting. That's at the very heart of it. And I'll show you more about that in just a minute. Just around that, you've got the camp of the Levites. Those are the tribes of the Levites. They're the priests. They're the ones who are responsible for doing the sacrifices. And then around that, you've got 3 camps on each side. So these are 12 tribes of Israel, 3 on each side. And every time they pack up and move and stop, they have to arrange it like this. And they have to arrange it in this way. Just notice, here's a detail we'll come back to. So boys and girls, listen, here's a detail. Notice the entrance to the tabernacle faces east. Okay, that is going to be important. That's an important detail. We'll come back to why. Now, I want you to imagine you zoom in. Okay, so that's the map of what the camp looks like, and you zoom right into the tabernacle, to this kind of tent where the priests work, where the sacrifices happen. Now, this isn't a great picture, but hopefully it gives you a bit of an idea. The tabernacle, that yellow box with the red bit in the middle, tent of meeting. If you zoomed in on that, here's what you'd see in a bit more detail. So around the edge, that's kind of the perimeter, and inside that is the courtyard. And then the tent itself is that slightly kind of thicker black rectangle. Outside of that, you've got the altar where the sacrifices are made, the laver or the basin where the washing happens. You come into, or you can go, if you're a priest, and only if you're a priest, by the way, can you go into the holy place. And there they have to keep the lamp burning. They have to keep replacing the bread and burning the incense as sort of symbols of God's presence with the people. And then in the next room this is called the most holy place, or sometimes the Holy of Holies. And only the high priest can go in there. Not any priest, only the high priest. And only on one day a year, the Day of Atonement. Okay, and that's the only time anyone can go in there. And the whole structure of this is really to try and say, look, now, by the way, in the most holy place, there's this ark or a box. And inside this box is the 10 Commandments on the 2 tablets of stone, a jar of manna, and Aaron's staff, which budded as they were on their journey. And this is the place, the most holy place is the place where God, not literally, but symbolically dwells with his people. That's why you can't just go in there. Only one person going there, only on one occasion a year. And the arrangement of this is all set up to say, look, the closer you get to God, the more serious things become. The closer you get to perfect holiness as an imperfectly very unholy person, like the more serious it is. And so in some ways, all of the rituals and the sacrifices are designed to teach you this kind of dynamic. So here's another picture that may help you. Imagine a bit like this. There's the temple, or the tabernacle rather, and the courtyard. Then there's the camp around that. And then there's this area outside of the camp in the black. And as you go sort of from the center, that's the most holy place, and then the holy place, and then to come into the courtyard, you need to be clean. So things can either be holy or they can be common. And if they're common, they can be clean or they can be unclean. But as you get closer to God, things have got to be clean, and then they've got to be made holy. But as you go away, things can become clean, and then in the camp you can be clean or unclean. Some uncleanness is dealt with by waiting, some by washing, some by sacrifice. And then outside the camp is where the very unclean things are. In fact, some things are so unclean they are put out there forever, not to come back in. They so pollute the space. And so all of this movement that's happening is designed to teach the people, look, you are sinful. And it's really serious. And God is perfectly holy. And you can't just wander into the presence of God. If you want to draw near to God, if God is really to dwell in the very center of your midst, there's a whole load of things that have to happen to deal with your sin and with your lack of being ritually or morally clean. And so all the activity is teaching the people these lessons. I've got a video. Now, I managed to find this on YouTube. This is a little 2-minute video that I'll show you, which just gives you an idea of what the tabernacle, if you were there 3,500 years ago, and you were part of the people of Israel, what would it have looked like? And it may have looked, this is a 2-minute video, something a little bit like this. Okay, now one more thing I want you to notice about this tent. And the tent is, it's a stylized garden. It's a sort of Garden of Eden. Now, why do I say that? Back in Genesis chapter 3, when Adam and Eve rebelled against God and were kicked out of the garden. Now, remember the detail I gave you earlier, boys and girls. We're told this. After God drove the man, that's Adam and Eve, out of the garden, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim, that sort of angelic guardians, and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. So Adam and Eve are expelled out of the garden. They cannot come back in, and there are cherubim guarding the way. They are now on the east side. And so just consider these just 3 details. Remember I told you that the entrance of the tabernacle is east. So it's because you are coming from the east side back to God. And the cherubim, which are only before this point mentioned in Genesis 3, appear again here. So there are cherubim guarding sort of over the top of the ark. Not only that, there are cherubim woven into the curtains of the tent. So as you come from the east, all of the curtains in front of you, there are cherubim there guarding the way back. And if you could go in, most of us couldn't, only the priests could. If you could go into the tent, what you find inside is a tree. Because the lamp is described as being carved like an almond tree. So all of this imagery is basically a way of saying, how do you and I get back to the garden? If we've been kicked out because we rebel against God, how do we find our way back? And notice God provides the way. God provides all this. He provides all of the instruction. He provides everything that's here to tell them, look, this is how you get back to the garden. God's intent is that you and I come back to him. And he is going to make the way for that to be possible. Now, for those Israelites 3,500 years ago, this was how they were to understand that. But of course, we know that Jesus was going to be the fulfillment of all of these things. God intends to draw us back, but there will be a great cost involved. And the third arrangement, that's the arrangement of text, the arrangement of the space, and finally and briefly, the arrangement of time. So all of the arrangement of Israel's calendar was again sort of on this theme. So again, we'll read about it. We'll look at this a bit more next week. But the number 7 is everywhere in Israel's calendar. So every week, there's 7 days. The 7th day is a day of Sabbath rest. Every year, there are 7 festivals. As I say, we'll do this in a bit more detail next week. 7 festivals. The 2 major festivals are 7 days long. Every 7 years, the land itself is to have a Sabbath rest. Every 7 times 7 years, there's this thing called the year of Jubilee where all of the land and all of the people sort of hit this big reset button and go back to their clans. So this idea of 7 is kind of everywhere. Every week, every year, every 7 years, every 7 times 7 years, this Sabbath idea just runs throughout the rhythm of their time. Why? Well, think about it. What is the 7th day in creation? It's the day of rest. And rest in the Bible isn't putting your feet up and watching Netflix. Rest in the Bible is being in relationship with God himself. It's enjoying knowing your Creator and being with him. That's kind of what rest signifies and symbolizes. So again, what does the rhythm of the time tell you? It tells you that the goal of creation is rest in God. The thing that you and I were made for is to find our Sabbath rest, our rest in our Creator, in God himself. An ancient theologian called Addison wrote it this way. He said, God, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you. So we were made for this. God intends to draw us back to find that true, deep, meaningful, eternal rest in relationship with God himself. And if you remember those 3 keys, you're quite a long way to getting a handle on the book. If you remember the arrangement of the text with atonement at the center of everything, if you think the arrangement of the space with the garden at the center of everything, if you think the arrangement of the time with rest as the goal of everything, you'll begin to make sense of what is this with all the rituals and the priests and the sacrifices. You'll start to understand it. And of course we know, and we'll keep saying, that Christ is the fulfillment of all these things. That's what we're going to just keep seeing. Because we read our Bibles, don't we, from the other side of the coming of Christ. And we know from our Bibles that Christ is the absolute fulfillment. So he is the perfect tabernacle. John says in John 1 that the Word became flesh and made his dwelling. Literally, where he tabernacled among us. So Jesus is the one who tabernacled in the very midst of humanity. Jesus, we know, is the one who fulfills the role of the high priest. He comes from the very presence of God. He goes back to the very presence of God. He's the high priest. We also know, don't we, that he is the perfect sacrifice. that the blood of bulls and goats was never really intended to take away sin. It was just to teach the people about their sin. But Jesus is described by John as the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Jesus fulfills everything required in that. And Jesus is the one who comes to give us rest, isn't he? Do you remember what he says in his life? He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest." Rest is this deeply rich theological concept of saying, come back to me. Come back to God. Find relationship, find meaning, find purpose as you know me. As you come back to me, as you find a relationship with me. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's no bad thing. But I think the book of Leviticus is going to show us that actually God can give us life and liberty. And actually, as we pursue holiness and we see holiness' pursuit of us, then we'll really find actually that true, deep, eternal happiness, that rest for which we were made. So come back next week and we'll start to look at rituals, sacrifices, festivals, and what they mean and how they point us to God's perfection, our sin, and Christ's solution.